Okay, so this presentation is entitled Introducing C++, but this is really how to get started on your first program. So let's take a look. A lot of this information comes from the D.S. Malik book in Chapter 2, but I'll throw in some of my own thoughts on this as well. So we'll start with C++, and C++ is a language that evolved from the C programming language, and when it was introduced by Strostrup Bell Laboratories in the early 1980s. There are a lot of different compilers that are available out there, and again, I hope you'll find the one that you like the best. We'll be using the C-Line integrated development environment, so there's an IDE available with that. We've gotten better at portability. There are still some strange things between different versions and different compilers, so it's not 100%, but we've gotten better at making them portable from one compiler to another. And in mid-1998, the ANSO ISO C++ language standards were approved. The second standard, called C++ 11, was approved in 2011, and the current is C++ 20, which came from September 2020. C++ is user-friendly, but people are fond of saying it's very particular about who it makes friends with. So there are 4 steps to creating a program, and this is kind of important for the overall process. The first thing you want to do is you want to understand the problem that you're trying to solve. That goes back to the algorithmic thinking. If you don't know what you're trying to do, chances are you're not going to pull it off. The next step is to develop a plan. What is it that you'll need to do? What are the steps? What information do you need to keep track of? And what order are you going to do those steps? And those go back to the sequential, iterative, and conditional instructions we talked about earlier. The next part is the fun part. That's the implement the program. That's put it into the programming language. And basically translate your plan into the programming language, into the code. And then the next step is to test your program, make sure that it works, and check and make sure that it works in all the different cases that you want it to do. And this is often an iterative process. So maybe you develop a plan that looks like a really good plan, but when you go to implement it, you say, oh, it doesn't deal with that particular case of negative numbers. Then you have to go back and kind of change your plan. Same thing with testing. You may run it and there may be a, an uninitialized variable that you didn't account for. And so you need to go back to step 3 and change that variable to be initialized. So, it's often an iterative process. You need to go back and revisit previous steps. So it's not just one time through. So steps are needed to process a C++ program, and you can do this in a couple different ways. One is to use a text editor to create the source code for your program in C++. Make sure you include the preprocessor directives. These are begin with the pound symbol. So the most popular one, of course, for our class is going to be pound include IOStream. And then we'll use a compiler to check that the program obeys the language rules and translate it into machine language, which is the object program, and run it. The other way to go about things is to use an integrated development or an IDE to develop programs in a high-level language. The tool that we'll be using in this class is the C-Line integrated development environment. Visual Studio is also a great integrated development environment in which to work. These integrated development environments have a lot of tools to support you in development. So mathematical functions, there'll also be links to the libraries and autofill information. You can, other tools that will come in are linkers, which combine the object code with other programs in library. As you develop more sophisticated programs, you're going to link to multiple files and link them together. And IDEs are great. They're quite user-friendly. They identify syntax errors. So, if you forget to put a semicolon, it's going to, catch that for you. And it also gives suggestions on how to correct them. Sometimes those are off a little bit, off by a line or so, and, can take a little bit of getting used to in that debugging process. You can build or rebuild the entire thing, which is just a simple command from the menu. And the loader will load the executable program into memory, and then you execute the program. So implementing the C++ program, step one is the editor. Then the preprocessor, which are things if you're going to redefine things or include different libraries, you'll compile it. If there's a syntax error, you need to go back to the editor and fix that. The linker will put together the library and the additional programs that you might have. Your program put it all together into one. Then you'll load it into memory and execute it. So here's a quick look at a C++ program. And this goes back to an earlier presentation we had where we talked about calculating the area and perimeter of a rectangle. So it starts out like all good programs in CS150, pound include IO stream using namespace standard. And some people eschew doing the using namespace standard, but it'll be simpler for our purposes if you go ahead and use that. That way you don't always have to do standard : C out for every piece of output, or standard : CN for every piece of input that you need to deal with. The next part is int main. That's the main part of the program. And then we open it with a open bracket that indicates that everything from that open bracket to the closed bracket is part of main. Then we have our variables, length, width, area, and perimeter. Double indicates that they're double precision decimal values. And then there's a cout statement, which is an output statement that's going to print something to the screen, and it will say program to compute and output the perimeter and area of a rectangle. The indel is in line, so it puts a carriage return line feed after the text. Then we have an assignment statement. Length is equal to 6.0, so that's going to tell us, hey, the length is equal to 6.0. We could also get that as an input from the user, but here we're just doing it as an assignment statement. Width is equal to 4.0, and then we calculate the perimeter. It's 2 times the length plus the width, and the area is equal to the length times the width. So again, we're making use of those assignment statements. And then we have our output statements. Here we start out with length is equal to, and then we output the variable length, which is the value stored in that variable named length, and an inline width, perimeter, area, and then we return 0 because main itself is a function and it needs a return value, so we return 0. And then we have that close brace. And that will be our first C++ program. We'll actually put that together in class and do a little bit of work with C-line. So in terms of laying out the program, we'll have these variables. These are values that can be assigned to particular, we'll assign values to these particular variables, and they'll be stored in particular memory locations. So again, we were interested in length and width, and we want to compute area and perimeter. So those are all our variables. The compiler will allocate memory available to hold all those. And then once we do something like an assignment statement, length is equal to 6.0, it will put 6.0 in that memory location for length. So for the remainder of the class where we're focusing on this, we're going to work through Lab 2, which is going to be your chance to put together a nice C++ program and get it to compile and run. The next time we'll explore a little bit more about C++, including the programming basics.